Hi, I'm Maura. The day my sister-in-law fired me, I was holding my feverish son in my arms. He was barely 5. She didn't blink, just said, "This isn't a homeless shelter. Leave." So I did. Humiliated, with my child burning up against my chest. I thought that was rock bottom, but what none of them knew was that a stranger watching from afar remembered me, and when he walked in as their new boss, everything they built began to unravel. Before we dive in, where are you listening from? Morning coffee? Late night drive? Drop a comment. I read everyone. I woke up to the raspy wheeze I've learned to time like a metronome. Kyron lay beside me on the pull-out couch, cheeks flushed, little chest struggling against the early March damp that seeps through our Buffalo duplex, no matter how high I run the heat. He's 7, old enough to want independence, still small enough to curl into my side when the night air gnaws. I pressed the back of my hand to his forehead, hotter than yesterday, but the thermometer read 99.5, borderline. School policy says fevers over 100 stay home. My mother-in-law's company policy says employees with children homesick must burn a personal day. I had 2 hours left in my PTO bank, both already earmarked for Kyron's next pulmonology visit. I stared at the ceiling fan and did the math I do every morning: rent, inhaler refill, utilities, lunch money. The unpaid column always wins. "Mom," Kyron croaked, "I can go to class. I'll just stay quiet." That brave whisper tore at me. His father used to say the same thing, then disappear for 3-day trucking hauls that became 3-month silences. I brushed Kyron's hair off his damp forehead and offered him orange juice. 5 minutes later, I tucked a blanket and a bottle of children's ibuprofen into my tote. I slipped my silver handkerchief, the one he'd saved tickets for at a school holiday sale, into the side pocket. I told myself he'd nap behind my desk for a few hours while I logged purchase orders. No one needed to know. Traffic crawled. It always does when the lake spits slush instead of snow. By the time we reached the shipping office, the parking lot was a gray soup of ice and road salt. I hustled Kyron inside through the side door, greeted the receptionist with a neutral smile, and steered him toward the cramped storage closet I'd quietly converted into a break room. He curled onto a rolling chair, knees hugged close, inhaler within reach. I'd just started reviewing delivery manifests when the break room door banged open. Brielle, my sister-in-law, regional operations manager, polished head to toe in winter white, filled the doorway like a storm front. Her eyes flicked from my computer screen to Kyron's blanket cocoon. "What is this?" she barked, voice slicing the chatter of 2 warehouse clerks lingering over coffee. "We don't run a homeless shelter, Maura." Before I could answer, Kyron coughed. Wet, rattling. Brielle cringed theatrically. "That's unsanitary, and it's a liability." She turned to the clerks. "Everyone out." My heart pounded, but I kept my tone steady. "He's on antibiotics. He'll sleep while I finish invoices. We can't risk another unpaid day." Brielle's lips curved into a grin I'd seen at holiday dinners when she belittled my thrift store shoes. "You think your sob stories entitle you to bend company policy? Grab your things. You're done here." I glanced at the clerks still hovering, waiting to see if kindness would cost them their jobs. No one met my eyes. I folded Kyron's blanket around him, lifted him onto my hip, and reached for my coat. My free arm shook, not from weight, but from the humiliation of silent witnesses. We walked the fluorescent corridor slowly. Kyron's head lolled against my shoulder, his fever jumped another notch, skin burning through my blouse. As we neared the exit, Brielle called after me, louder so the warehouse could hear, "Try childcare next time, Maura. This isn't a daycare for failures." Outside, wind slapped my face with ice pellets disguised as snow. My boots slipped on half-melted slush, while I maneuvered to the far corner of the lot where my Honda waited. The engine block had coughed its last in January. We took the bus these days. I huddled beneath the sagging awning of the adjacent property, balancing Quran and my tote. He shivered violently. I fished out the silver handkerchief, dampened it with juice, and dabbed his forehead. He smiled weakly. "It's cold, Mom. I know, baby. I've got you." My words fogged in the frigid air, as unsure as my future. Footsteps crunched behind me. "Excuse me, Ma'am? The voice was deep, polite, not Brielle's acidic drawl. I turned. A man in a charcoal overcoat stepped from a black SUV, snow flicking off his shoulders. His gaze landed on my face, then lowered to Kyron. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "The office is closed to visitors right now." He tilted his head. "You handed me hot cocoa on Main Street one December years back. You helped a lost kid find the police station." The memory slammed into me. A barefoot boy in torn gloves, Christmas lights blinking above bus fumes. I clutched Kyron tighter. My arms trembled for a different reason now. "Was that you?" I whispered. His eyes softened. "It was, and it looks like you could use a warm place today." Snow stung my lashes as the weight of recognition settled between us. I turned, the wind needling my cheeks, afraid I'd imagined the question. The stranger's breath floated in the frigid air between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I should cross. "You used to hand out blankets and soup downtown," he said, voice softer than the storm around us. "I was one of those kids. You probably don't remember." An image flashed, Christmas lights blinking above a bus terminal, a skinny boy hugging a chipped thermos I'd filled from a dented pot. I'd pressed a knit cap over his ears before hustling to my night shift. 10 years felt like last week, and a lifetime all at once. "That was you?" My words came out as steam. He nodded, eyes kind yet searching. "Name's Aiden. Today's technically my first day here. I plan to walk the floor unnoticed, get a feel for the place." He glanced toward the building, irritation flickering. "Didn't expect to find the culture rotting at the front door." Kyron stirred against my shoulder, coughing hard enough to rattle his ribs. I adjusted his blanket, instinctively shielding him from the wind and this conversation that already felt too heavy. "I'm sorry you had to see that scene," I murmured. Aiden lifted a hand. "You didn't do anything wrong. Coffee's hot across the street and the seats are warm. Can you spare 10 minutes? Pride told me to bolt, walk until my toes went numb and I couldn't feel shame in them anymore. But Kyron's wheeze deepened. Warmth trumped pride. 10 minutes, I said, voice threadbare. Inside the cafe, cinnamon rolls perfumed the air, thawing the chill in my bones. A barista slid 2 mugs across the counter. Aiden paid before I could object. We found a booth where the radiator hummed like distant waves. Kieran curled up next to me, sipping cocoa in small, labored breaths. "I promised myself," Aiden began, cradling his cup, "if I ever had the means, I'd build a place that didn't stomp on people who were already tired." I traced the rim of my mug. I barely had enough to feed myself that winter. I just couldn't leave a kid shivering outside. "That $5 coat and cup of soup changed more than my body temperature," he said. "It changed my picture of what people could be." He leaned forward. "So here I am, owner of River North Logistics, your employer, I suppose, and I find my first real impression is an employee tossed into a snowbank with her sick child." Humiliation flared again, hotter than the steam from my drink. River North's board might agree with Brielle. Sick kids and shipping deadlines don't mix. Aiden shook his head. "Policies exist to protect, not punish. Clearly someone forgot that." He exhaled, gaze heavy. "I'm asking for 24 hours before you decide this company and everyone in it are a lost cause. Let me look into what happened, top to bottom." 24 hours sounded like a flutter of a bird's wing against hurricane glass, too fragile to matter, yet something in his eyes, a determination etched by surviving more than corporate warfare, anchored me. I nodded once. He smiled, not triumphant, just relieved. "I'll arrange a car to take you and Kyron home. Keep your phone close." Kyron tugged my sleeve. "Mom, can we come back here one day? The cocoa's nice." His innocence sliced through every adult calculation. I kissed his temple. "We'll see, buddy." Aiden escorted us to a rideshare, then strode back toward the office's glass doors. Through the vehicle's rear window, I watched him vanish inside like a candle swallowed by fog. 20 minutes later, with Kyron snoring on my lap, my phone vibrated, a single text from an unknown number. "Hang tight. Rotting walls come down fast when you know where to swing." Inside the building, Brielle's laughter echoed over speakerphone as she boasted to someone about finally ridding the place of liabilities. She didn't notice Aiden step into the doorway behind her, arms folded, patience worn thin. Aiden's voice cut through Brielle's high-pitched laugh like a curtain falling on bad theater. She spun, still gripping her latte, and blinked in surprise at the man she'd dismissed as a wandering consultant an hour earlier. Wordlessly, he gestured toward the hallway that led to the glass-walled conference room. She followed with practiced confidence, heels sharp against polished tile, while staff exchanged wary glances but kept typing. I watched through the lobby window, Kyron asleep on my lap, his breath finally even. A receptionist offered me a chair. I shook my head. I'd spent the past 5 years learning that comfort was earned, not given. Inside the conference room, the blind swiveled shut, turning the transparent box opaque. I counted heartbeats, tried to focus on Kyron's warm weight. Failed. A janitor pushed a mop bucket past and whispered, "Good luck, hun." The kindness nearly undid me. The door opened sooner than I expected. Aiden beckoned me with a nod. I shifted Kyron carefully to the receptionist, promising I'd return in minutes, then stepped into the room. Brielle sat at the long table, composure cracking in the tightness around her mouth. Aiden motioned for me to stand near the screen while he remained by the lights. "Brielle," he began, tone even, "walk me through your decision." She laced her fingers, performing poise. Mora brought a contagious child into a sterile environment. We handle food-grade shipments. Liability could bankrupt us. I enforced standard protocol. Her delivery carried that faux empathy she used at family dinners when critiquing my mashed potatoes. Aiden lifted a small remote. The lights dimmed. The screen came alive. Security footage, time-stamped 8:30 that morning, flickered. Me at my desk, Kyron tucked in the corner sipping juice, no one within 15 feet. The next clip jumped to Brielle storming in, pointing at my son like he was trash on the floor. The audio echoed, "This isn't a homeless shelter. Get out." The silence afterward felt heavier than the words themselves. Brielle opened her mouth, shut it. Aiden froze the frame on her sneer towering over a coughing child. "That doesn't look like concern for liability," he said quietly. "That looks like abuse of power." He set a thick manila folder on the table. "Human resources backlog," he explained, sliding pages toward her. Complaint after complaint, former interns, 2 drivers, a purchasing assistant, each citing Brielle's hostile tone or personal vendettas. Dates spanned 3 years, signatures varied, handwriting shaky in places. "Funny thing," Aiden added, "none of these ever reached corporate counsel." Color drained from Brielle's cheeks. "We resolve issues in-house," she muttered. "By deleting them?" He produced a second folder, my personnel file. A mint green evaluation form lay on top, praise from my previous supervisor dated 14 days ago. A red stamp across it read, "Withdrawn." Below sat an unsigned promotion recommendation. Aiden looked at me. "Did anyone tell you this was pending?" I shook my head, throat tight. He turned back to Brielle. "She was in line for advancement, correct?" Brielle pressed her palms flat. "Performance reviews are confidential." "Not when altered." He gathered the folders, his voice calm but razor sharp. "Someone has been protecting you. That protection ends now." For a moment I thought he'd fire her on the spot, but he merely straightened. "You'll hear from HR by morning. Leave your badge here." The dismissal, delivered without venom, landed harder than any shouted insult. Brielle's hand trembled as she unclipped the plastic card and set it beside the untouched latte. Outside, gray clouds spit sleet that rattled against the awning. I reclaimed Kyron, his head dropping to my shoulder the way it did when he was a toddler. We settled onto a lobby bench. I hummed the lullaby my grandmother once sang over scratchy radio static. 20 minutes passed before Aiden emerged, coat draped over his arm. He sat on the other end of the bench, careful not to jostle Kyron. "I can't promise an overnight miracle," he said, voice low. "But I could use someone who remembers what it's like on the receiving end of a closed door. Come back tomorrow? Help me rebuild from the inside?" Snowflakes caught in his dark hair, melting before they could linger. I studied his face, the earnest lines, the boy I once fed, the man offering more than charity. Kyron stirred, eyelids fluttering. My throat ached with the weight of decisions I'd survived. Marriage, abandonment, endless budgets, today's public exile. This was the first choice in years that felt like it might widen our world instead of shrinking it. I met Aiden's gaze. "I need to sleep on it," I whispered, though certainty already blossomed in my chest like early crocus through iced soil. He nodded, as though hearing the yes beneath my caution. I rose, blanket-wrapped child in arms, and stepped into the gritty slush of the parking lot. Sleet tapped my coat like impatient fingers, but the air felt lighter than it had at dawn. I said, "Let me sleep on it." But the words were theater. Sleep rarely visits a mother in crisis, and it certainly didn't that night. By the time the rideshare reached Mercy General, Kyron's breathing had turned to a shallow whistle, so I carried him straight past registration and onto the triage scale. The emergency resident ordered a nebulizer treatment and an IV for fluids. I sat in the half-lit bay listening to the monitor's steady ping, each note declaring my child still here, still fighting. The nurse, gray braid, kind eyes, adjusted Kyron's blanket. "He's going to pull through," she promised. Exhausted, but stable. I nodded, though exhaustion felt like a country I'd been exiled to years ago. While the nebulizer hissed, memories crept in like draft through a cracked window. I'd lived most of Kyron's life performing double duty, mom and dad, breadwinner and bedtime storyteller. Tonight that old weight settled on my shoulders again, but something new coiled beneath it. Resolve. The world had shoved us into another corner. I was done apologizing for taking up space. The beep of the monitor folded into an older sound, alarms wailing, boots rushing, smoke curling under a pediatric ward door. I was 22 then, volunteering evenings to restock linens. When the fire alarm shrieked, staff herded patients toward exits, but amid the chaos I heard coughing from a side room. A boy, maybe 8, hiding under a gurney, eyes wide and trapped. I wrapped him in a wool blanket, ducked low, and pushed through the haze until cool air slapped our faces outside. He cried against my shoulder. I remember telling him the fear would pass, that strangers sometimes step up when family can't. I never learned his name until yesterday. Across town, Aiden sat alone in his office, high above the silent loading docks. On his desk lay a faded newspaper clipping, "Child saved in late-night hospital blaze." My own photo blurred in the ink, half obscured by smoke stains. Next to it rested my company badge, edges melted by the space heater he'd nudged too close. In the quiet, I imagine he traced the picture with his thumb, whispering, "I waited 10 years for the chance to repay a moment she probably forgot." Dawn seeped through ER blinds, pale and cold. Kieran's fever broke near sunrise. He slept with his mouth open, dreaming of playgrounds untouched by inhalers. The attending cleared us to leave, instructions printed on pink paper. At discharge, a hospital volunteer pressed a bag into my hand, thermos of soup, fresh blanket. I smiled at the symmetry. Outside, my phone pinged. "Aiden, you deserve more than your old desk. Director of Community Logistics. Benefits day 1. Think it over." I rode the city bus toward our duplex, rocking with each pothole, rehearsing excuses to decline. Yet, when I stepped inside and caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror, hair wild, coat streaked with salt, eyes fierce despite the fatigue, the excuses dissolved. If they thought breaking me meant I'd disappear, I told the woman in the glass, they chose the wrong target. I straightened Kiran's backpack, buttoned a clean blouse, and tied the silver handkerchief around my neck like armor. An hour later, we stood in River North's marble lobby. No back entrance, no side door, just the main hallway where Employee of the Month portraits stared from gilded frames. Kyron clutched my hand, still drowsy but determined. We rode the elevator to 14 in silence, broken only by the whisper of cables. The doors slid open. Brielle knelt beside a cardboard box, sweeping framed certificates into it with jerky movements. She looked up, surprise curdling into something sour. I offered a small, steady smile, the kind you give someone you're finished fearing. Brielle's jaw twitched as I stepped from the elevator, Kyron's hand tucked in mine and a visitor badge clipped to my lapel. She blinked twice, once in recognition, once in dread, then looked away as if I'd evaporate if ignored, but I was still there when she looked back, steady as the sunrise she'd hoped to eclipse. The morning hum of River North warped around us. Phones rang, forklifts beeped, yet a hush rippled wherever we passed. When I reached reception, the scanner chirped. My old badge, reactivated overnight, lit green. The HR director, Ms. Rhodes, emerged holding a glossy plastic keycard. "Regional Director Hannigan," she said, voice formal yet warm. "Welcome back." I took the card, weightless, but it anchored me more firmly than any apology could. Whispers floated from cubicles. "She's a director now?" I heard she got Brielle canned. I kept my gaze forward, heart drumming a rhythm of equal parts nerves and resolve. Kyron squeezed my fingers, then scampered toward the playroom River North maintained for visiting families. He looked back, chest puffed. "I'll draw your new office, Mom." Across the hall, Brielle hovered near the copier like a moth stunned by daylight. She marched past interns and straight to Aiden's glass door, flinging it open so hard a plaque rattled. I followed at a distance, stopping short of the threshold but close enough to hear. "This is absurd," she hissed. "She isn't qualified for director." Aiden leaned back in his chair, unshaken. "She's qualified and, more crucially, trusted." Brielle's shoes tapped a nervous staccato. "Is this revenge for that night at the hospital? You were a scared kid. Your memory's blurred." He folded his hands. "My memory of smoke and someone carrying me through it is crystal, but today isn't about childhood debts. It's about leadership." His voice remained calm, yet carried the firmness of a sealed freight container. "People who show up when it matters, that's the currency we're trading in now." Brielle's shoulders sagged, fury draining into fear. She spun out, nearly colliding with me. For the first time since I joined the family, she had no words. Just a strangled breath before walking away, spine suddenly fragile. Alone in the office assigned to me, nameplate still bearing temporary tape, I surveyed the pale walls. On the desk lay a teal folder labeled Community Outreach Logistics. My own proposal, the one Brielle once mocked as bleeding heart nonsense, sat on top. A sticky note in Aiden's handwriting read, "Let's build this together." I traced the ink with my thumb, surprised at how quickly hope could grow back over scorched ground. The phone rang. A cheerful voice. "Ms. Hannigan, this is Mrs. Rogers from Lakeview Elementary. Kyron told the class his mom is a boss now. He's beaming. Thought you'd like to know." Heat pricked behind my eyes. "Thank you," I managed. I pictured Kyron crouched over crayons, sketching an office with windows larger than our apartment. His drawing would be disproportionate, the desk huge, the coffee mug giant, but his pride would fit just right. Mid-afternoon, I stepped into the elevator headed for the lobby. Brielle was inside, phone glued to her ear. She lowered her voice, unaware of my reflection in the mirrored panel. "Yeah, she's back," she whispered. "And she's got his ear. Time to use the backup file." A pause. "Yes, the custody angle." The doors opened on her old floor. She slipped out, oblivious, and hurried to a desk now stripped bare. From the bottom drawer she retrieved a metal lockbox labeled in thick marker, "Hannigan, Custody Risk." She tucked it under her arm, stalking toward a private conference nook. I stayed in the elevator, heart marching faster than the descending numbers. So Brielle wasn't finished. She aimed lower now, at the one place I bled easiest. And just like that, my greatest enemy wasn't just Brielle. It was my past. The moment I stepped out of my office, I knew something was off. People weren't just whispering, they were pausing mid-conversation when I walked by, exchanging loaded glances like I couldn't see them. One woman from legal even gave me a tight, uneasy smile, then quickly looked away. As I passed the break room, Javier from operations stepped beside me, lowering his voice. "Hey, Maura. Just giving you a heads up. Some folks are saying Brielle's stirring something up. Something personal." I blinked. "Personal how?" He hesitated. "Something about a file. HR's got their hands on it. I don't know more. Just be ready." I offered a faint nod, pretending calm while my pulse began to rise. But I didn't have long to speculate, because when I rounded the corner back toward my office, Aiden was already standing there, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, voice low but firm. No warmth, no trace of the man who handed me a handwritten note just days ago. He followed me inside, closed the door behind him, then slowly placed a brown folder on my desk. I didn't sit. I just stared at the thing like it might bite me. "What is it?" He sighed and opened the folder gently, as though trying to soften the blow with silence. Inside was a printed report. I recognized the logo on top instantly, Child Protective Services. My breath caught. "This," I whispered. "This is from shortly after Kyron was born," he finished for me. "A hospital reported you were admitted for severe exhaustion. Brielle submitted this anonymously through HR's whistleblower channel, flagged it as a potential concern for a senior leadership role." I felt my knees go weak. My fingers grazed the paper, not turning the page, just touching it like I needed to confirm it was real. "She said I was mentally unstable?" I asked, my voice quieter now. He looked pained. "HR has to do a full review. They're not accusing you of anything, Maura, but protocol is protocol." I looked up at him. "Do you believe this?" He didn't flinch. "I believe in what I've seen. You carried this company through some of its hardest quarters while raising a son. But HR's hands are tied. It didn't matter that it was from years ago. It didn't matter that I had voluntarily sought help, took care of myself, healed and raised a brilliant little boy on my own. The implication was planted, and in this building, perception often preceded truth. After dinner, I helped Kyron clean up his Lego trail from the hallway and tucked him into bed early. He was more chipper than usual, probably sensing I needed a little joy. "Guess what I made today?" he beamed, pulling a folded construction paper from his backpack. "It's our house, me and you, forever." It was a crayon drawing, shaky lines, our stick figures standing in front of a home with a chimney, a tree with orange dots beside it. I bit down the tremble in my throat and smiled. "I love it." He nodded proudly. "I told Miss Allen that my mom is a boss now. She said she's proud of you too." I tucked him in tighter, kissed his forehead and whispered, "No one's taking you from me." But long after he fell asleep, I couldn't. I lay in bed, mind racing, replaying every moment from that year. How I barely slept, how my body gave up before my spirit did. I remembered how Brielle once joked I wasn't cut out for single motherhood, but I hadn't thought she'd use it against me. The next morning came far too soon. I had just poured myself a second cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, two individuals stood holding badges, one woman in a dark gray blazer, the other a man with a clipboard in hand. CPS. I opened the door, steadying my voice. "Good morning." "Ms. Hannigan?" the woman asked. "Yes, come in." They stepped in, scanning the room with quiet professionalism. "We're following up on a reopened report. Mind if we take a quick look around?" I nodded. "Of course." I led them through the house. The kitchen was spotless. I'd cleaned it obsessively the night before. Kyron's room was warm, colorful, full of books and space-themed posters. I showed them his closet, the stocked fridge, even the vitamins I'd labeled in the cabinet. As they took notes, Kyron emerged in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Hi," he said sleepily, then held out a juice box from the counter. "You can have this. Mom always makes sure I get breakfast, even when she's tired." The two agents glanced at each other, not coldly, but thoughtfully. There was something in their eyes that said this wasn't what they expected. The woman smiled at Kieran. "That's very kind, buddy. You okay?" He nodded. "I'm good. My mom's cool." When they left, they thanked me politely and said I'd hear back after their report was filed. No promises, no reassurances, but they didn't leave with suspicion in their eyes either. As soon as the door shut, I collapsed onto the couch. I didn't cry. I couldn't afford to. I stared up at the ceiling, anger simmering beneath my ribs. An hour later, once Kyron had been picked up for a play date by my friend Tracy, I called Aiden. I didn't even say hello. She's not trying to win, I said flatly. She's trying to break me. There was a pause on the other end. You still have the company's trust, Maura. Don't let her shake that. I won't, I said, but I'm not playing defense anymore. That evening, somewhere across town, Brielle clinked glasses at a dimly lit wine bar, her lipstick perfectly smudged like she planned it that way. To new allies, she toasted, smirking at the man across from her. He tilted his drink. You were right. She's vulnerable. The kid's her weakness. Brielle smiled coldly. That's why I aimed there. The moment I hung up with Aiden, I couldn't sit still. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't just fear. It was fury, confusion, and the sense that every corner of my life was being pressed in. Kyron sat on the living room floor, drawing another house with oversized windows and stars in the sky, unaware of how close our little world had come to being dismantled. I need some air, I muttered, mostly to myself. I turned to him, forcing a smile. Want to grab a hot cocoa with me? His face lit up as if I'd just offered him a trip to Disneyland. Within 20 minutes, we were settled in a quiet corner of a small coffee shop a few blocks from home. It was early afternoon, the kind of cloudy that made everything feel softer around the edges. Kyron had his cocoa, carefully blowing on it before each sip, and I was nursing a lukewarm chai latte I'd barely tasted. My mind kept flickering back to the CPS visit, to the haunted look in Kyron's eyes when the agents asked if he felt safe at home. I was staring out the window when I noticed him. A man in his mid-30s, sitting across the room with a newspaper folded in his lap, kept glancing over. Not the kind of glance that makes your skin crawl. This was different. There was something familiar in it. Warm. Kind. He stood slowly, walked over, and paused at the edge of our table. His voice was quiet, hesitant. Do you still carry Band-Aids in your purse? I blinked. My first instinct was to pull Kyron closer, but then it hit me. The bus station. The bruised boy in an oversized sweatshirt, shivering in the corner with no socks and a swollen lip. I had been 18 on my way to an interview. He looked no older than 10. I remembered handing him my sandwich, wrapping him in the spare cardigan from my bag, and giving him 2 Band-Aids for his scraped knee. You remember, he said, smiling gently. You were the first person who saw me. My breath caught. Garrett? He nodded. Time had reshaped him. His face was stronger now, confident. But those eyes? Still the same. Still carrying too much for one lifetime. I motioned to the seat across from me. Sit. As he eased down, Kieran looked between us, curious. I whispered, He's an old friend. Garrett didn't waste time. After that day at the terminal, my father picked me up 2 hours late. Didn't ask where I'd been. Just told me to stop crying or he'd give me something to cry about. That night, I hid your sweater under my pillow, for years. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I never thought I'd see you again. I've been watching from a distance, he said carefully. I knew it was you the moment I saw your name attached to the studio. I furrowed my brow. Studio? He exhaled. There's something I need to tell you. I go by Garrett Lorne. My father is Malcolm Lorne. My stomach twisted. Lorne Corp? He nodded. Brielle didn't recognize my last name. She thought I was just another silent investor. I let her think that. I leaned back in my seat, stunned. I've been reviewing internal emails for months. The red flags were everywhere. Your warnings, the staff complaints, how quickly everything you touched got buried. And now this CPS stunt? He shook his head. That crossed a line. I blinked hard. Wait, you knew all this and didn't step in sooner? I was gathering proof. Moving too soon would have let her bury it all, but now I've got more than enough to act. He slid his phone across the table. I glanced down. Dozens of email screenshots. Brielle's name in subject lines. HR complaints marked no action taken. Back and forth threads between her and 2 mid-level managers about how to frame the narrative. I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted. So what now? You're not alone anymore, he said softly. I've got legal counsel reviewing everything. You'll be protected. Kyron, too. I nodded slowly. I appreciate that, but she's relentless. I know, he replied. Which is why we're not just defending. You're going on offense. Garrett reached into his leather messenger bag and pulled out a thin folder. He placed it gently in front of me. Inside was a typed document. HR resignation letter. Name, Brielle Morin. I looked up, stunned. He smiled. It's dated, signed, filed, but not submitted. All it needs is the right moment. I ran my fingers along the edge of the paper. Why keep this? Because leverage only works when your opponent still thinks they're in control. Kyron tugged at my sleeve, showing me his new drawing. This time, 3 figures instead of 2. One of them had light brown hair and kind eyes. Who's this? I asked gently. Kyron shrugged. He smiled at you. Garrett looked down, a bit bashful. I folded the letter and slipped it back into the folder. My hands were steadier now, my mind clearer. It was no longer just about surviving, it was about reclaiming everything they tried to rip away from me. And that timing came faster than either of us expected. Garrett's text arrived before dawn. Be in the lobby of Lorncorp by 10. Business casual, consultant badge waiting. Surprise your enemies by standing where they think you don't belong. By 9:30, I was pressing my shoulders into the same navy blazer I'd worn the morning Brielle threw me into the snow. Kyron, still in pajamas, waved from the window as Mrs. Tracy, our retired neighbor, buckled him into her minivan for a science center field trip. He didn't need to breathe yesterday's anxiety. I tucked his drawing of Mom's office into my purse, next to the silver handkerchief and a brand new box of Band-Aids. Old habits. Downtown, the Lorncorp Tower pierced February clouds like a mirrored needle. I'd once scrubbed its lobby floor on overnight contract. Now a receptionist greeted me by name and clipped a consultant badge to my lapel. Garrett stepped from the elevator, impeccably calm, and ushered me toward the executive boardroom. Quarterly meeting, he explained under his breath. Agenda item 4 is Brielle's showpiece, Employee Wellness Initiative. He arched an eyebrow. Thought you might have insights. I smoothed the frayed cuff of my blazer. Wellness was not the first word that came to mind. Inside, 30 polished executives surrounded a horseshoe table. Brielle stood at the lectern, a slideshow glowing behind her, smiling stock photos, yoga poses, buzzwords about holistic workplace balance. The hypocrisy stung like lemon on a paper cut. Garrett waited until she launched into projected absentee rate savings. Then he rose. Before we applaud, let's discuss wellness in practice, starting with wrongful termination. A hush fell so abruptly, I heard someone's pen clatter. Garrett gestured toward me. My pulse hammered, but my voice emerged steady. I was dismissed for bringing my feverish child to work after exhausting my PTO. I kept my gaze on the room, not Brielle. That morning, I was told River North was not a homeless shelter. Later, HR complaints I'd submitted about unsafe workloads vanished. Emails requesting ergonomic supplies for warehouse staff were ignored. Yet here we are, talking about wellness. I clicked the remote Garrett handed me. Security footage filled the screen. Brielle shouting over my son, then the time-stamped CPS file she leaked. Audible gasps. I felt decades older than the frightened woman in that video, yet stronger too. An HR vice president scribbled notes furiously. Another board member whispered to legal counsel. Brielle's face drained of color, but she straightened. This is a smear campaign, she snapped. I protected company liability. That's leadership. Garrett stepped forward, a second folder in hand. Real leadership listens. He spread affidavits on the table, letters from interns bullied into quitting, warehouse drivers disciplined for requesting overtime pay, even a client who moved accounts after Brielle mocked his accent. This company has no room for tyranny disguised as leadership, he concluded, sliding a crisp envelope across the polished wood. Your pre-signed resignation, effective immediately. Brielle's mouth opened, closed. She reached for indignation but found no footing. Still, she tried. I was framed. He's just an investor. You've never met him before. Actually, Garrett cut in, my family owns 41% of voting shares. Should anyone question authority, my surname is Lorne. Silence cracked into murmurs. Brielle's confidence crumpled like tissue in rain. She backed away from the lectern, eyes darting for an exit that wouldn't invite whispers. A tap sounded at the doors. The senior VP of operations entered, shepherding Chiron, coat zipped, museum sticker on his sweater. My breath hitchhiked up my throat. "We thought you'd want both of your heroes present," the VP said gently. Chiron slipped his hand into mine, then faced the room. His voice barely carried, yet every ear caught it. "That's my mom," he said into the microphone Garrett angled toward him. "She's the bravest person I know." Applause erupted. Hesitant at first, then rolling like distant thunder moving closer. Brielle's resignation slid farther across the table with each clap until it rested before the chairwoman, who signed it without ceremony. I knelt, hugged Chiron, and whispered thank you against his temple. He grinned, oblivious to the power he'd just wielded with one sentence. Garrett extended his hand to help me up. "You did it," he murmured. We left the boardroom amid congratulations and handshakes I scarcely registered. Outside in the marble hallway, my phone vibrated with a new message. Unknown number. One line. "You think the board is the battleground? Check your mailbox." But as we left the building, a message was waiting on my phone, one that would shake everything again. The text that buzzed my phone on the sidewalk read only, "Check the mailbox," signed with no name. I slept badly, expecting another ambush, but morning arrived clear and calm, and so did the first quiet breakfast I'd shared with Chiron in weeks. We balanced pancakes and headlines. Every local outlet ran the same story. Regional director exposes toxic culture, executive resigns. Garrett's public statement praised Ms. Maura Hannigan's integrity. Chiron munched happily, eyes shining each time my name scrolled past the ticker. He didn't brag. He simply watched me the way kids look at fireworks, silently certain the sky is supposed to blaze. After dishes, he tugged my sleeve. "Can we clean the garage, Mom? I want space for a rocket station." Cleaning sounded simple compared with subpoenas and redemption, so we pulled on hoodies and plunged into the dusty cavern. Cardboard towers lined one wall, relics of every chapter since Chiron's birth. While I sorted baby clothes for donation, he rummaged near the back and emerged cradling a small cedar box. "This was behind the paint cans," he said, curious. A swirl of dread coiled in my gut even before I saw the handwriting across the lid. "For my son, when the time is right." My voice snagged. "Kai, that's personal. Could you hand it?" But he was already prying the clasp. Inside lay a single sealed envelope, edges yellowed. He slid out the letter, unfolded it with careful fingers, and began to read. I lowered onto a storage bin, heart knocking. "I'm sorry I won't watch you grow," the letter began. Each line cut deeper. It spoke of a father pressed by his family to insist on an abortion after a specialist warned of respiratory complications. I'd refused. He'd walked. And he wrote, "If he ever reads this, tell him he was never the problem." I was. Chiron's shoulders trembled. "He didn't want me." The words were small, but they punched air from my lungs. I knelt, pulling him into my arms. "You were always wanted," I whispered against his hair. "From the first flutter to right this second. I chose you every single day, and I'll choose you every day after." Tears soaked my sweatshirt, his and mine. I reached into another crate and found the faded drawing he'd made at 2. Our stick figures beneath a crooked rainbow, the word home scrawled above. I pressed it into his hands. "That's the truth that matters." He studied the picture, then hugged it to his chest, as though reminding himself what permanence feels like. By mid-afternoon, sunlight warmed the doorway, and the ache inside my ribs loosened. We tacked the drawing to the fridge again, its paper edges softer, story stronger. I brewed cocoa, and Chiron, sniffly but smiling, asked if he could practice spelling attorney. When I raised a brow, he shrugged. "I might need to defend moms someday." Weeks passed. Garrett's foundation funded a mentorship program, and I volunteered evenings, guiding single parents through bureaucratic thickets I knew by heart. On Saturdays, Chiron visited the downtown law library, absorbing case studies like comic books. Whenever I felt doubt slip in, I wrote another letter, sealed it, dated it, tucked it into the cedar box for him to read when he was taller than my hope. A single cruel morning, firing, humiliation, a child in my arms, had unraveled an entire web of harm, yet it also stitched new threads: justice, friendship, futures brighter than resignation letters. I carried Chiron out of that office believing silence was weakness. Now I knew silence, held long enough, can thunder. And if anyone ever doubts the power of quiet courage, tell them about the day I walked out of that office, holding my son and my silence. Have you ever been humiliated for doing the right thing, then lived to see the tables turn? Tell me in the comments. I read every one.